Hello, all my YouTube friends. I watch the Joe Rogan podcast. I actually used to watch the Joe Rogan podcast a lot. I don't watch it that much anymore. I just don't really have the time. This came across my desk. This is about a murderer he had on. Apparently, he had someone on there on the podcast, and then a few weeks later, he murdered some people. So this should be really interesting. I don't know if you've ever heard of this channel before. It's called Podcast Cringe. So let's get into this. This should be interesting.
So I guess we just get right into it. The last case that we talked about, we had a very unfortunate incident happen after the podcast, about a month later.
Yeah.
The gentleman beheaded somebody.
What?
Allegedly, yes.
Allegedly.
Yeah, I thought this one
What?
was probably
How
better
is
off
that
just
funny?
me.
Hold on. Listen. I get that it's ironic and all that other stuff, but if you had a guest on there who later on killed somebody, even if it is something as crazy as a beheading, I don't know if it's very funny. I mean, look at him laughing. It's and I understand that everything's a joke to Joe Rogan, and he's safe in that space where he could say, well, it was a joke, it's satire, so I could say whatever or do whatever I want, but I don't it's your words still have, and your impact still has an effect on people. So just come on, man.
Let me think real carefully about the next.
Yeah,
the
I
next
know.
guy.
Jamie and I were both talking about it. Do you think he's going to bring somebody in?
Oh gosh.
With well over 2,000 episodes of JRE released over the last 15 years, Joe Rogan's had some pretty controversial guests on the podcasts. One of those guests was Sheldon Johnson, and for all of Rogan's talk of assassins and murderers, killers, etc., it was only a matter of time before he had an actual murderer on the
Wow.
show. But there's one thing that we know about our boy Joe. When he fucks up, he does it in the most ironic way possible. You see, Sheldon went on JRE with longtime guest Josh Dubin, a lawyer who advocates for prisoners who were wrongfully convicted. Except when he brought Sheldon on the podcast earlier this year, he was the first guest that was actually guilty, but had supposedly received a harsher than appropriate sentence. Josh helped him to get his sentence reduced to time already served after 23 years in prison.
You don't want somebody to go into the prison system and come out worse.
This is
Right,
him?
which happens.
Which happens,
most
right?
of the
And
time.
then
Wow.
we hear about these horrific incidences.
Oh, this is in
let him
February.
out. 2 days later, he pushes somebody into the train tracks, right? This is not what you want. How do you prevent these things from happening, right? By being proactive, by being responsive instead of being reactive.
This is all new news to me. I this went right past me. I'm so busy. So if you know anything about this case or what actually happened, let me know in the comments. This is crazy. This is this is really crazy.
Don't wait for something to happen.
Just a few weeks after he spoke those very words in Joe Rogan's studio, Sheldon would allegedly murder and dismember
Wow.
a former inmate and attempt to hide his body parts in different freezers. But what he didn't realize was that in the 25 years since he'd been in prison, CCTV footage had improved to the point where you could no longer get away
That's him?
with wearing a
Oh my
blonde wig
gosh.
to disguise yourself while moving body parts around in suitcases.
What an
Want to
idiot.
start a podcast, but not sure how? Riverside has got you
Let's
covered.
get this.
First,
There was so many crazy things to that case. The craziest thing was him trying to fool the security cameras with a wig. Like, I get.
Listen, he's almost joyful in talking about this, and like I said, I get it. Joe Rogan floats above this, all these situations and stuff like that. But come on, man, seriously, this is a little bit more serious than your normal subject matter.
Guess he didn't know how high resolution cameras had gotten over the 25 years that he was in jail.
I mean, apparently there's a lot he didn't know based on the surveillance.
It doesn't look good.
What do they say in Texas? It ain't too shiny.
It's so crazy because, we went out with him that evening. We brought him to the comedy club. He was hanging out with us in the green room. And then the news broke. And then the comics were all like, hey, man, what the fuck? What the fuck you doing bringing that guy around? I'm like, well, we didn't.
That's pretty
I'm as
scary,
shocked
dude.
over it now as I was in the moment. I mean, it's really not funny. I mean, I'm only laughing out of sort of nervousness.
It's
I
not
guess.
funny. Listen, this goes to show, like, vouching for people you don't really know. And this happens a lot. And I bet it happens a lot in Hollywood. You're vouching for people you just met and you don't even know. Say, oh, this is a good guy. This is a good guy. And then you turn it on and tell the next guy they're a good guy. And he turns out to be a freaking murderer. You know, you guys got to be really careful who you vouch for.
You know, I called him a miracle on this show.
Right.
And,
See?
and the media shoved that straight up my ass. I mean,
As they should.
Of course, but that's what they're going to do.
So I'm going to get into this episode in a lot more detail in just a moment because it ended up turning into a therapy session for Josh Dubin, who, as you can imagine, feels partly guilty for his role in getting Sheldon out of prison early, only for him to go out and commit one of the most gruesome crimes possible.
Listen, the work that this guy does, I have no criticism for it. I don't really know a whole lot about him, but if he really does get wrongfully accused people out of prison, that's really good on him, and that's a great thing. And it's just unfortunate that this happened with this person, but wow.
I'll give you my opinion on whether Josh has anything to answer for, or if this was just an unfortunate incident outside of his control.
Right.
And there was something that I noticed as this conversation went on that's very similar to the conversations Rogan has with his comedy buddies. So I'll get to that in a moment because speaking of comedians, did you hear what Rogan said in that previous clip about how he felt betrayed by Sheldon because he brought him to the infamous comedy mothership green room to hang out with some of the top 250 comedy assassins? What did Ron White say about how exclusive the green room is?
The best thing about the green room is how restrictive it is, you know, that you just can't go in there. You know, you're just not, you got to earn that spot in the treehouse.
Apparently that's not true.
So anytime you open the door, you'll see, you know, some of the best comics alive sitting there talking about stand-up comedy and, you know, writing jokes and laughing and having a good time. But, you know, that's our little space, man, and it is the greatest thing on earth.
Well, it turns out all of Rogan's buddies who are supposedly murderers get upset when they meet an actual murderer. But for those of you who don't know the full picture, this was Josh Dubin's 8th appearance on JRE, his first going back to 2020. He's a civil rights attorney who advocates for people who have been wrongfully imprisoned, and he brings some of them onto the podcast to tell their story and spread awareness for all of the work that he does.
Seems like a good guy.
Sheldon Johnson was not wrongfully convicted. He was actually guilty of his crimes, but the difference was he supposedly received a much harsher than necessary sentence relative to the crimes that he pleaded guilty to.
Well, he was the only guy that you had ever brought in that was actually guilty, that you felt was in jail for too long. You know, he got a 50-year sentence, correct?
70.
70, and it was reduced to 25?
It was just basically time served. He did about 30 years, and they resentenced him.
So I think Dubin misspoke there. Sheldon said he originally got a 50-year sentence. I'm not sure where he got that 70 years from. Maybe it sounded better in his head. But if you go back to Sheldon's appearance on JRE from earlier this year, he explained the crimes he was guilty of and how he ended up getting such a harsh sentence. And one of the things that stuck out for me was how much he downplayed his crimes, making them out to be common assaults where nobody actually got hurt, rather than being honest that each incident included multiple felonies, which all contributed to such a long sentence.
One thing I know about people that don't want to take responsibility for what they do is they justify everything they do, and they say, we'll see what he has to say about this, but I've noticed that like everything's just like, yeah, but this is the circumstances behind that, and that's why that happened. So let's see what he says.
It's a shame Rogan's bullshit detector was malfunctioning that day, but stick around because wait until I tell you about Sheldon's father and son.
I caught the gun charge that triggered the felony that it allowed them to be able to sentence me the way that they did in 1994. 2 people in particular I gave consignment to, and I ended up getting arrested for a case. And when I sent someone to go pick up the money from them, they kind of just was like, you know, whatever, I'm not paying them.
You got arrested for something. You're in jail.
Yes.
These guys figure since you're in jail, it, we're not going to pay him.
Yeah, I'm not going to pay him.
And then the case that you were arrested for got dismissed.
Got dismissed.
Right,
I got acquitted.
So then you come home.
So then I come home and, you know, I need my money. You know, I gave you something.
Okay.
And we had an understanding that you were going to pay me. And when I came home, when I finally located this particular individual, he had his girlfriend with him. And this guy owed me $5,000. And when I saw him, he had a bunch of jewelry on. He was with his girlfriend. She had a bunch of jewelry on. And I said, hey, man, where's my money at? Oh, yo, I was going to pay you. And I took his jewelry. And his girlfriend happened to be there. And Unfortunately, she got caught up in the situation. I had a bunch of young guys with me, and they robbed her as well. And he got...
You could see by his body language, he's lying his ass off. He brought some boys over there just to do that, to rob him and whoever was there and do whatever he wanted to do. He wanted to teach his person a lesson. He looked right at the other lawyer when he was saying this shit. He was lying. He was lying his freaking ass off. You could tell right there.
I hit in the head with the gun right here on the side of his head, and he got 2 stitches. And they gave me 25 years for that case.
Dog.
Did you hit him in the head?
No. One of the guys that I was with hit him in the head. And he identified me in a photo array, unbeknownst to me.
Array.
He identified me in a photo array. This guy, you know, as far as I was concerned, he was in the streets just like I was. So in my mind at the time, this is a guy who I gave something to. He's living an illegal life. I'm living an illegal life. In hindsight, as I moved on and I became more mature and I began to reevaluate myself, I realized how wrong that was.
Yeah, right.
But that was later on. At this time, I committed the crime, and
you're still justifying it. You're still justifying it.
Another guy that I ran into, he also owed me some money. He owed me $7,000, and it kind of went along the same ways. I got word that this is where he was at, and he was selling drugs, and I was going to get my money. And the same circumstances kind of ensued. Saw him, hey, what's going on? Reading in between the lines and outside the margins without really going into all of the details, I robbed him.
Okay, so he obviously has practiced a lot of this excuse making, reading outside the lines, inside the margins, whatever the fuck. He's obviously an intelligent guy, so listen, man. This is a shady, slimy motherfucker. You could tell just by the way he's talking. I hear a lot of people in prison talk like this. They talk real slick, and you know they have nothing to do but you know to sharpen their conversational skills. But this guy is full of shit. He really is.
Because he owed me $7,000.
Did he get physically hurt?
No, he didn't get touched. Got roughed up a little bit, but
that is so ridiculous. Listen to what he just said. He just lied to your fucking face just now.
There was no physical harm, nothing.
So how do you rough somebody up but they didn't get touched? That whole conversation was weird as fuck. Out of all the wrongfully convicted people that Josh Dubin could have put on there with him, he chose this guy. I've got a lot more to say about that in a moment, but let me tell you about his father, because when I was reading up on him, something stuck out for me that I just could not get past, and it actually made me fucking angry. Sheldon's dad, Sheldon Sr., was a deaf crack addict who was also a convicted criminal. Listen to this, though. Johnson Sr. separated from his wife in 1978 and started a family with another woman. In 1986, he was convicted of rape after sexually assaulting his 7-year-old stepdaughter 3 times because, quote, his second wife refused to have sexual relations with him because she was angry at his continued drug use. And get this, he was only given 5 years probation by the judge, who claimed that a harsher sentence, would entail excessive hardship for his family, who depended on him as the breadwinner. But he had to move out of the house due to a court order requiring Johnson Sr. to stay away from his stepdaughter. What the actual fuck?
Dude, our justice system needs some serious work. This just looks like a pattern of a piece of shit raising a piece of shit. Oh my gosh.
Bro, what is this? 5 years probation? What are we doing here, B?
Wow.
But let's get back to what Sheldon was just saying in those clips from JRE. That was his version. Now listen to what actually happened. Johnson committed a series of robberies targeting people that owed him unpaid protection money during his time in prison. During one such robbery, Johnson non-fatally shot a man in the back as he attempted to flee from him. He was arrested under the alias Thomas Smalls in Manhattan for possession of stolen property in 1997, and months later in December, he was arrested for attempted murder and robbery. In 1999, after rejecting a plea deal that would have had Johnson serve 23 years in prison, he received a sentence of 50 years without parole for 41 years. That's on fucking Wikipedia, guys. Did Rogan or Josh Dubin, who's an actual lawyer, bother to read that before letting Sheldon lie through his teeth on that episode?
Listen, are you just talking to these people and just taking what they're saying on face value? Holy shit, man. This is really reckless.
It gets worse though, because Sheldon has a son, also named Sheldon, who dodged a manslaughter charge at the age of 14. In April 2008, while his dad was imprisoned, his son, now 14 years old, also named Sheldon, was charged with manslaughter for the April Fool death of a 24-year-old Columbia University international student. He was struck and killed by a passing SUV as a result of Sheldon punching him in the back of the head in a random, unprovoked attack after being encouraged to do it by his friends. But he was not convicted,
shit.
and instead, he was ordered to 18 months in a juvenile detention boot camp. So, with all of that bullshit in mind, you'd think Rogan and Dubin would finally admit that they fucked up, right?
I've had a lot of time to think about this, and I know you and I have discussed it privately, and I kind of went into a hole. My first thought was, I had two thoughts, was that poor guy that got killed, and it was a gruesome murder. You know, it wasn't just beheaded. I think he was dismembered completely.
Well, he was trying to get rid of the body, right?
Right.
Allegedly. What was the circumstances
Crazy.
with the guy that he allegedly killed?
I don't know if I'm doing it just because I'm distancing myself from it subconsciously, but I don't know all the circumstances. But apparently this was someone he knew from childhood and from in prison. I've heard rumors and, you know, stories about the guy threatened his son to, he slashed Sheldon when they were in prison. I don't know if you remember, Sheldon had this big gash across his face. But I don't know. And I frankly don't want to know at this point because someone lost their life. You know, if I felt even remotely responsible for that, which I do, and, you know, I can be at peace with it, but I didn't cause that.
You know, he does a lot of good, but this guy would have still been in prison if it wasn't for him. So you have to freaking own up to that, man. You just have to.
That death.
Well, if the guy really did slash his face, if you've been in literal mortal combat with a person and this person is allegedly threatening your son or whatever.
Where are you going?
There's only so much you can do to stop a person from seeking revenge.
What the fuck?
I guess.
Especially
Call the
if they
cops.
don't have any hope outside of the system and
Come on.
they've been completely institutionalized. There's
Listen, man. Okay, Rogan. So you're basically telling people, like, in certain circumstances, you're mentally justified in doing this shit?
the reality of prison life. There's a reality of being incarcerated. There's a reality of taking a person who's convicted of a violent crime and putting them in jail with violent people for 30 years. There's just a reality. And you know, I don't know what
It's terrible.
history he had with this man that he allegedly killed. You can only take so much.
Yeah, that's actually crazy. Reaching that hard to empathize with a psychopath is all kinds of fucked up. And let me just get one thing straight here. This is the thing that Rogan and Dubin refused to acknowledge as they sat there counseling each other and sniffing each other's farts. Nobody could have predicted that Sheldon Johnson was going to go off and commit such a gruesome murder.
Right.
Allegedly. But the real issue for Josh is the fact that he was parading this convicted felon around as if he was a wrongfully convicted and now exonerated prisoner who was the victim of an unjust legal system and trigger-happy prosecutors.
Listen, the way he talks with his glasses on, he looks like a smart guy. He probably didn't do X, Y, and Z. You don't know what's in the soul of a person. You have to look at what they actually do.
I've said this before about Josh Dubin's JRE appearances. I really enjoy them. Some of the wrongfully convicted guys that he brings in with him were so humble and forgiving. They were grateful for all the help and publicity surrounding their exonerations, and they just wanted to get back to their families and try to claw back what little time they have left.
It's beautiful.
Sheldon Johnson is not that guy. I figured that out from just reading a couple of paragraphs on Wikipedia. Josh Dubin would have had access to all his files, his whole history, all the evidence against him, etc., etc. Yet he still thought this guy was a good example of the fine work him and his team have been doing. And even when he did stop and reflect on what this means for him and the work that he does, he still managed to fudge the figures and give himself yet another pass for being reckless.
I have to take a hard look at what I'm doing and take the mirror out and look straight in it and say, like, what did I do wrong?
You did nothing wrong.
Well,
I don't think you did anything wrong. You just listen.
Come on,
The
Joe.
man had great qualities. He like when you talk to him, he's very intelligent, very nice guy. He just thought he could get away with getting payback on somebody.
yeah, look, that's super gracious of you. He didn't let me down. Look, I was the public face of his resentencing. There was a lot of great people involved. There was nothing that raised a red flag for anyone. He didn't let
How?
anyone down if he did this, people will draw their own conclusion. He'll have a trial. He didn't let anyone down if he did this but himself and the people that still need help. The recidivism rate for people that have served long sentences like that is less than 1%. It just happened to happen on a case where I was
that true?
involved. I have no...
Is it really that low?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. If you look at exonerations, resentencings of people that have been incarcerated for more than 20 years, it's that low.
Okay, so when I heard Josh say that, I went down a bit of a rabbit hole and I ended up discovering that he was full of shit and stretched the truth to suit his own narrative.
Oh, no.
Let me explain for a moment.
Oh, no.
So, he said the recidivism rate for wrongfully convicted prisoners was less than 1%. Now, there isn't a lot of data to go off, but the consensus seems to be that the rates are much lower for the wrongfully convicted, so we'll give him that one. But he also threw in resentenced felons in there as well and tried to pass them off as having a low recidivism rate, which is just not true. Resentenced prisoners tend to have similar rates of reoffending to prisoners who see out their sentences and get released as normal. According to a study by the Bureau of Justice Statistics, about 68% of released prisoners were rearrested within 3 years and 77% within 5 years. So, trying to lump Sheldon Johnson into that 1% category of wrongfully convicted is straight up lies. But at the end of the day, Josh is working on the front lines, guys, and I'm just some dude on the internet.
Yeah, good
so
work.
he's probably right.
Good on you, man,
mean,
honestly,
after
but-
all, he's an expert when it comes to incarceration. He read a book about it when he was at college.
I can't apologize for giving someone a second chance and then, they squander it. All I can do is say, what could I have done better? I mean, I have a deep understanding, I think, of what incarceration means. I mean, I read this book. I always get his name confused. Is it Henry Jack Abbott or Jack Henry Abbott? It's called In the Belly of the Beast. When I was in college.
I think I've heard of it.
I don't want to offer this as an excuse, but what it has caused me to do is reevaluate and say, look, maybe I need to take a much closer look at what sort of mental health counseling these folks are getting. Like Sheldon, I arranged for him to be speaking to a trauma therapist. Should I have been on him more to be going to those appointments? Maybe. I keep on sort of
That
adding
wouldn't
this
have changed
disclaimer.
anything.
Maybe this is my aversion to like getting attacked. I am not excusing if Sheldon did this. I just think that it's not so simple as, oh, you help some guy get out and get resentenced and look what he did and f all these people and f your movement. Okay, you're entitled to that opinion. That's where I leave it.
Yeah, you can't listen to those people.
One of the best things I did in the wake of this whole Sheldon Johnson incident is I turned comments off on Instagram and turned
I think you would have to, yeah.
Turning comments off is a nice thing because
You're going to get some
you
vitriol.
can't believe the good stuff or the bad stuff. You
Yes.
just stay forward.
Yep, that's right. Whenever you majorly fuck up, just disable the comment section and everything will go away. Except Jamie forgot to disable the comments on the episode here on YouTube. How dare Josh show up without a murderer? You can blame whoever
shit.
you want, Dubin, but at the end of the day, the judge was right. Besides the body parts in the freezer and multiple other crimes, Sheldon Johnson is a good dude. Who could have known he was going to do that? I don't know, maybe the judge that called him a danger to society before this clown got him out. The comment section is 1,000 times better than the podcast in this case. He should have been left in jail. Some people can't be rehabilitated. Josh Dubin playing the victim couldn't be more repulsive. What a douche.
Wow.
I have a very deep understanding of what it's like to be in prison. I mean, I read this book. I can't believe Joe brought this guy back on. And as of recording, the podcast had around 6,000 dislikes to 10,000 likes, which is pretty high for an episode of JRE. But I just want to finish off with something I said earlier about how this reminded me of the conversations that Rogan has with his top 250 fake murderers, and it's that they can never take responsibility for any wrongdoing.
There's some
I
truth
think
to
that's
that.
what bothers me the most about JRE.
Listen, Rogan is a gracious host, but he makes all his guests feel like whatever they've done is okay, and he doesn't really. He confronts people when it's something. I'm not saying he's afraid of confronting people, because he's definitely done that on the podcast, but just not when they're speaking to him in a nice way. He just.
These days, when was the last time you've heard Rogan or one of his guests say, you know what, I messed up and I think I'm going to take some time off to reevaluate my decisions and take responsibility for the consequences of my actions? Instead, we get this circle jerk of apologists who gas each other up and pretend like they didn't do anything wrong. I mean, for Joe to sit there and tell Josh that he didn't do anything wrong and to just shut out the haters because they have limited information and don't know the full story is wild. It's actually the opposite. Josh had all the information and still made a bad decision, knowing the severity of Sheldon's crimes and the likelihood of him reoffending.
Jeez.
But Josh is in the business of selling his narrative that these guys need a second chance, which might be true, but he definitely chose the wrong pinup boy, that's for sure. Anyway,
For real.
Make sure you go and check out the link in the description to my Patreon if you're interested in my longer form uncensored content. While you're here though, hit the subscribe button and make sure you give me a thumbs up if you ended up liking this video. Thanks for watching, guys. I'll catch you in the next one.
I promise the next time I bring a guest on, they will be vetted.
Listen, I have a very strong opinion about this. I don't think this guy should have been released back into the world. And it doesn't sound like they did their homework whatsoever. And this has a lot to do with how Joe, brings people that, he doesn't really know a whole lot about, and, starts bringing them up. He has to understand that he does have a platform that people watch. I mean, look at the disaster that Brandon Schaub was. I mean, you made him you made him think that he could be a comedian, and he's a total freaking joke right now. So, take responsibility for some of the things you do, and the fact that, your podcast does have an impact on people. So let me know what you think in the comments. I still like Joe Rogan. I like his podcast, but, let's have some reality checks here. Let me know what you think. Have a good day.